Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, I want to go over the conundrum that is the Alabama Crimson Tide and whether I think that they should have gotten in the college football playoff over TCU or Ohio State. Now, obviously, Georgia and Michigan deserve the number one and the number two spots because they're both undefeated. They won all their games, and they're going to put Georgia in over Michigan because of resume and all that. So that makes complete sense there. But where everybody has the problem is whether TCU, Ohio State, and Alabama is the right order for 3, 4, and 5. And I'm going to break down why I think it is. A lot of people are talking about the order of the rankings from TCU to Alabama from 3 through 5, and I can understand why, because a lot of people will use the argument, well, TCU is not a brand. TCU should not be in the top 4 because they're not one of the 4 best teams. They don't have as much talent as the rest of the teams in the top 4 or even the top 7 for that matter. And that makes sense. TCU does not have as much talent as those other teams, but they've won all their games in the regular season, and they lost by 3 points in overtime to a top 10 Kansas State team. That's not enough to drop TCU out. Now, if other teams like Tennessee were still in the picture and Clemson was still in the picture, then yes, maybe TCU could have fallen out. But the way everything worked out with the college football playoff rankings, how all these teams had 2 losses, you had to put TCU in because even though they lost, they only lost by 3. And TCU has done enough this season with all the wins that they have, even though TCU is not a brand and even though TCU, again, make the argument they're not one of the 4 best teams, and I can agree 100%, you had to put TCU in with the circumstances that are at hand. Ohio State at number 4. Ohio State, they have the bad loss to Michigan in everybody's eyes because they lost by 22 points on their own field. It was a terrible loss. But at the end of the day, the reason why Ohio State made the playoff over Alabama is because Ohio State had only 1 loss. I understand that 1 loss was super bad because the argument for Alabama is they have 2 losses only by 4 points. They lost to LSU by 1 and they lost to Tennessee by 3, both on the road. And Ohio State lost by 22 at home. That argument is valid, and I can definitely see why Alabama Crimson Tide fans would see that and then justify that they should be in the playoff. And the argument's there. I'm not going to say it's not because Alabama, you can say, is one of the 4 best teams. For sure, Alabama probably is one of the 4 best teams. And a lot of people would even argue that Alabama probably has the best chance of beating Georgia than the other 3 teams in the top. Now, you could argue Michigan has a better chance than Alabama. I don't know. Maybe even TCU and Ohio State could beat Georgia. We don't know. But a lot of people would say that Alabama should have been in the top 4 because their 2 losses were only by 4 points, and Ohio State's 1 loss was by 22. But at the end of the day, the College Football Playoff Committee put Ohio State in because they had 1 loss, even though it was by 22 to Michigan, and Alabama had 2 losses. That's why Alabama did not get in. Plus, Alabama cannot play for the SEC championship game like LSU could, and LSU, unfortunately for them, lost to Texas A&M, which knocked them out of the whole thing. But if Alabama could have been able to play against Georgia and they had beaten Georgia, they would have probably been in the college football playoff, but they didn't have that game. Ohio State and TCU only had 1 loss. Again, it's argued that Alabama should have made the college football playoff. For me, though, I'm glad that Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State were the 4 teams because they lost less. And I'm not saying that losing less is the be-all and end-all, but that's what the College Football Playoff Committee did. And I think they did the right thing because a few years ago, Alabama had 1 loss, and they were 11-1, and Ohio State was 11-2, and they had the conference championship win. They still put in Alabama over Ohio State because they had 1 fewer loss. So that worked in Alabama's favor that year. So even though I can see with Alabama fans why they should have made the college football playoff, but at the end of the day, I feel that the committee did the right thing putting Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2 for obvious reasons, and TCU and Ohio State because TCU deserves to be in the top 4 for what they've done all season, and only losing 1 game by 3 in overtime to a top 10 team is not enough to knock you out. And Ohio State, even though it was a bad loss to Michigan at home by 22, they still lost to the number 2 team in the country. It was only 1 loss. They played well the rest of the season. And at the end of the day, having 1 fewer loss than Alabama is why they made the college football playoff. And I'm glad the committee made that ruling, even though I understand why a lot of Alabama fans can definitely see why Alabama could have made the college football playoff. But I definitely think the committee did the right thing. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Alabama should have made the college football playoff or whether you think the committee got it right 1 through 4. And I will see you next time.